Hey everyone, I'm just doing a quick demonstration video to show how I tested, how I tried to replicate Hardware Unboxed settings, just to give them a reference really, because obviously there seems to be an issue with their Navi performance in the benchmarks, and the main thing that alerted me to this was from my own gameplay. I was seeing numbers in the top right that seemed to be on average, like every time I'd check it, even if I'd stare at it while playing, on average my numbers were considerably higher than what I was seeing in their benchmark results. Even at ultra wide, ultra nightmare, 3440 by 1440p, I was getting comparable results to their ultra 1440p non ultra wide, just 2560 by 1440 results at the same section of the game. And so I shared that info. Steve's picked up on it now, and I've also ran some benchmarks with MSI Afterburner. But I wanted to do this video just to give him a something he can actually look at to make sure that none of my settings are messing with the results. So I'm on a ultra wide monitor. I actually had to center scale 1080p down to accurately record this. So I've got Radeon open, Radeon software. I'm on the performance tab, and I'm using an Xtreme IV cooler. I want to stress that on my RX 5700, but I've turned off the fan profile. I normally run an aggressive profile. I've turned off the power tuning. The VRAM's not adjusted, and I've forced the clock speed. So this is forcing it. So even if the cooler is somehow benefiting the temps and keeping the temps a little bit lower, which it's not with the fan profile off, yeah, I actually need the fan profile on to get good boost. I've forced the frequency to around base frequency. So this is to give an apples to apples, like worst case scenario. This is how an RX 5700 performs, or at least my RX 5700 performs in Doom Eternal. That's not inflated by my cooler. So most people should be able to replicate this, really, or they'll be getting better results than this at the boost of around 1700. Because the Sapphire RX 5700 Pulse, which is my model, the advertised boost is 1750. So that's what I normally run at. I actually run it at 1750 megahertz, but I'm doing it at 1620 just for the sake of that my system's not tuned or tweaked to inflate the performance. And my test bench overall, see, I'm running the same drivers, 20.3.1. My test bench is weaker. So this is going to affect the minimums and maybe the average a little bit. But my test bench is 6700K at 4.5 gigahertz and 16 gig RAM at 3000 megahertz. I can't get it stable any higher. And this is much weaker than the 9900K test bench. So my CPU is not boosting my performance either. My performance seems higher in 1080p and 1440p, and then it's on around their XT performance result. So if we look here, I have shared this info already in the comments on the page, but my performance is like, where do I go? Back up the top here. My performance is literally, around this level, if not higher, which really throws off the performance of the other GPUs, because people considering going AMD or Nvidia are going to go Nvidia if they like Doom based on this, when it's a little bit inaccurate. There's there's a discrepancy. I don't know what it is, but I'll go into it just to show what I did to make sure that Steve is not wasting his time, because he can watch this and you can obviously tell me, oh, you did this wrong. But I do benchmarks for fun in my free time. I do a lot of benchmark videos, so I also put a lot of value into accurate results. So if I go into my settings, 1920 by 1080, HDR's off, field of views at default. In the benchmark video that you guys posted up, in the actual YouTube video, I saw motion blur was on high, so I've left it on high. Performance metrics, ultra. All turning this up, it's on ultra in the video, but all turning this up does is give a little bit more information. Yeah, it adds the CPU and stuff, so you can see there, I'm not faking anything here with a crazy overclock CPU or something. And then preset ultra. Sharpening, I don't know about these because you don't show it in the Hardware Unboxed video. I couldn't actually see you scroll down past this part. So maybe it was at the default, which is somewhere here, like it's a pretty low number. Sharpening shouldn't affect the FPS by 20. Scaling mode, the more important setting, is off. And I think by default, anti-aliasing depth of field is off. Turning this on should actually boost performance. I've tried it with it on and off, and I couldn't see a noticeable difference. I prefer it off, but for this test, I'll leave it on because that's default. Like if someone just went in and popped it into ultra, default, that should be on at the very least. And resolution scaling, which is actually on by default, you have to turn off to try to replicate this. But at the very least, you know, I've tried turning this up. All it does is make the screen look fuzzy. It didn't make my performance any different in my own testing. So I'm just going to leave it off, just because if film grain boosts your FPS by 20 by turning it off, then everyone should know anyway, but it doesn't. It's just a preference, these two, as far as I can tell. So I've gone to the same section of the game, same checkpoint that Steve was using. I'm just going to reload this, and if I stand around about here with the gun covering the door of the truck and stare down the lane, you can see my FPS is 139. This is at base frequency, okay? So if I'm getting even a little bit of boost or I have an air-conditioned room, you know, it would be better. And now we'll wait for the monster to walk past. The monster does drop the FPS a little bit, but it's interesting anyway because of the screenshot you shared, Steve. Because on the RX 5700 screenshot, it was at 130 something, staring at this scene with the monster already gone. And when I stare at the scene with the monster gone at the same rough position, I'm getting 150 plus at base frequency, okay? So that's a discrepancy there. For the non-intensive part, it's getting more than the 2060 Super, maybe closer to the 2070 Super, I'm not sure, 1080 Ti. And then if I go to this part, which I can't replicate easily because shooting the barrel happens way too fast, like I don't think it's detectable to see the 1% low by human eyes. I can only really tell the average, that's what I'm going off for most of my opinion. But I shoot these two, and you saw the FPS is like 140 the whole time. But there could be a drop that's super fast, like you just undetectable with that benchmark software. But I did notice when you come through this hole, if you stare at the ship down there and have the aimer pointed down that way, the FPS does drop a little bit, but it goes away once after a short amount of time. Like it actually goes from 112 and then it goes back up to the 130s. So that will affect the average result at the end of a benchmark run, but only if you stare at it for a long period of time. Like you have to literally come through the wall and just aim there, and then the benchmark average will drop. But for the most part, as soon as I jump down here and start shooting stuff, look at the FPS. It's at like, I can't look anywhere to get it, like to stay at 130. Maybe down here, but even over here where they did it, Steve took another screenshot with the broken thing on the right, the pipe on the, left, pipe on the right, and looking at the hand, the aimer pointed at the hand, I'm getting 145 FPS, which is matching the 2060 Super. Okay, even if it's only a margin of like 5 to 10 FPS, that is a big difference when you're looking at the relative performance between two graphics cards. So yeah, 140 FPS at base clock, no less. And then if I jump down here, the FPS is just going to drive the average right up because the FPS is super high in this area. So if this is part of the benchmark run, my FPS average just keeps going up the longer I stay down here. So if I try to drag it out to a 1 minute run, it inflates my result. So I actually found ending the benchmark early rather than trying to space it to a minute helped me get a lower average frame rate. But the lowest recording I could get was still 5700 XT level with a stock. Oh no, I shouldn't have went past that. With a stock 5700. So that doesn't make sense, does it? Like if my lowest result using MSI Afterburner to run a benchmark run was on par or higher than a 5700 XT. And I could only get it to go down by dropping my base frequency to 1620 and staring at the low FPS sections, which are intensive, but they're not actually part of the actual gameplay. Like when you break through the wall, you don't stare down at the ship for 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Maybe you look at it, but you'll probably notice the monsters on the left and right in the barrels and shoot them first, then drop down to continue shooting monsters, right? So Anyway, I've got MSI Afterburner running, so I'm going to do a live benchmark and hope this turns out good. But again, I'm not an expert benchmarker, so I don't have like a secondary monitor or a good stopwatch to try to space. I can't get the timing perfect to drag this section out into 1 minute without literally just staring at low FPS angles. Like in all games, there's angles you can look at, certain places where you can drop the FPS if you stare at them long enough, but I don't think they're indicative of actual gameplay. Playing through the scene normally is what I imagine Steve did. Even if he did try to look around and like look at the scenery, doing that just boosts my average frame rate up higher than the results they were getting. So I'm going to hit F7 and just walk through the scene, and I've got a notepad file ready. I've got it to save in here that should appear with the results. So you can see here, like, I'm not an expert at like Photoshop or anything that I could somehow fake these. So anyway, F7, and I'm going to walk through this section. Jump up. It might actually, it was also capturing my Radeon software when I tried to do this. Grab the armor. So this is the part, when I break through this wall, if I stare down right there, oh, it's not doing it now. But if I stare down there, I was getting like 112 FPS, or maybe when the monsters come a bit closer. But maybe it's not going to do it because I fixed my resolution scaling. I was having issues with resolution scaling in the monitor. I'd seen that the settings in Radeon software, like I've got it on centered at the moment. When I had it on full, it was messing with the performance. But you can see here, there's certain scenes, like maybe over there, it's dropping to 120, 130 if I stare at that long enough. So that'll bring my average frame rate down the longer I do it. But if I actually jump down and try to kill stuff, like Steve stood here for a bit in the video, if I actually fight, which is more accurate representation, my FPS is definitely averaging fairly high, up at the XT level of performance. So I'll see from this point, if I keep recording to try to make it a 1 minute video, look at the FPS, it's just going to keep driving the average higher and higher. So I have to stop the benchmark there to avoid that, to avoid inflating it artificially by looking at these non-intensive scenes. So the only intensive scene is up there, staring into the distance. So if I load the checkpoint back, I'll do a few runs because it'll all come up in the benchmark file, hopefully. I'll just close this Radeon software that I've got open. I'll just double show you that nothing has been tweaked. Okay, nothing's changed. It's all off, and even the fan, it's actually running warmer. Like normally it runs around under 60, but this is the boost setting that the cooler can affect, and I've got it locked down at base frequency. Okay, so I'm closing that. See the benchmark files appeared? So going back to the checkpoint, hit my benchmark button, and I'll do it a bit more smoothly this time. I won't stare at the low FPS bit. I also noticed the more runs I did, sometimes the FPS seemed to be a bit lower between runs. Like, I don't know what is up with that. Reloading the same. See here, this bit, 116. When the rubble's falling from the door and staring down at the ship, this is where I can artificially force the average test to go down, but then it goes back up. It's like when that creature, the floating eye thing, was going past, the FPS was dropping. Or maybe a texture from the rocks. It was like a... But yeah, around here, see 117. But if I shoot the barrels, that's not causing an FPS drop. If I shoot these at this distance, it's not causing an FPS drop. It's actually boosting the FPS to fight, playing. But I've got Radeon Chill and all of that turned off. So if I actually go down here again and go to, where is it? Gaming. Doom's not showing up here. Global, anti-lag, chill, and boost are all off. It's only sharpening I've got running. There's nothing fancy going on here. I haven't like adjusted any of these. Tessellation was an AMD optimized. It should be on that by default, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, you can see those there. Maybe this should be on standard. Could that affect it? What if I put it to high? And this is forcing AMD. It's on Vulkan, so this is only for DirectX 9. But maybe that on high, I had it on performance. But that shouldn't matter. Personally, I don't think it matters. No, you see, if I look down here, I'm still getting this 143. And it doesn't matter where I jump down, the FPS is high down here. So this isn't really a good spot to compare to the lower results that Hardware Unboxed was getting. This is boost FPS section of combat. Running the gun doesn't. Yeah, I can't get it to drop by doing actual gameplay. And then yeah, so running the benchmark past this point is just gonna give me a way higher result. Which I don't know, that could be normal. It could be normal that I'm getting this high performance, and that's why I'm saying there's an issue with the Navi results that they're posting. So I'm gonna try to do this a bit smoother now. I do grab the armor though, because most people would do that, and you'll see the low FPS bit here when I break this wall. It drops if I stare there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See the thing's going past. Maybe it's that eye causing it. So I'm gonna stare at it, and then, yeah, now that it's gone, something happened that made it go back up. But you can see when I shoot the barrels, it drops around 140, from what I can see. And I also noticed in the video that they posted, they turn and look here, but that just boosts my average FPS again. They look behind them, and then they drop down. See, anything to do with fighting down here just boosts the average. My average is high, okay? It's way higher. It's higher than the XT. Just looking at the frame rate and trying to get it to drop. Maybe if I stare at the ship, at the hand, at this angle, it goes down to 140, right? Or if I stare off into the something in this area drops the FPS, it's still forcing. I'm artificially lowering it by doing that, by trying to look for the spot that will lower the FPS, rather than just playing through the section of gameplay. Okay, so I'm gonna check the time. I'm starting at 4:18. I'm gonna do 3 runs now. Playing it normally though, not just explaining anything, just playing through it normally as a player would, rather than trying to focus on the lowest FPS intensive scenes, which aren't really relevant to the gameplay. They're like looking at the ship too long is not relevant. It's fighting the monsters that I would imagine would give the most accurate representation of the benchmark. So yeah, staying here too long, I guess, could lower it, but it's still high. It's not like I have to force myself to look at this stuff for ages to get the average result to go down. And as soon as I go here, the average is just gonna go. It's gonna shoot up based on the high FPS I'm getting. The average is gonna be. Unless there's maybe an interval in Review Tuner. I know there's a polling interval. They could have set it super low or super high. I'm not sure, but it's still, at the end of the day, it should still just turn out to be an average. I've got mine set on default. Where is it? Doom Eternal. Set up here. Average interval is 1000. Frame rate averaging interval should be the default. So setting it lower, I think, might help capture some more of the FPS drops. I don't know, but if they've got it on a different number to default, I like from a few guides, like what was that other site, Gamers Nexus, they recommend 1000, so I've left it at 1000. If you guys are using a lower number or a higher number, please let me know, because I can retest. But I've just left most of it default. I just checked all the benchmarking stuff. I don't normally run actual benchmarks with the text file. That's why I haven't. I don't know what settings. Even if I did, my settings won't necessarily be the same compared to other reviewers and other benchmarkers. So going back in, we were finished here. Load this again. So I am hitting the hotkeys to redo this bench every time. But yeah, they stretched it out into a minute, this section of the checkpoint. And the only way I can really stretch it out is if I try to take my time. Stand here for a bit. See there, 121. Like around this area, when the thing's going past, it goes around 1 under, and then it as soon as it starts to leave, or something happens, something loads, it goes back up to 140. And if I stay here too long, I'm just boosting the FPS average too much. When in the video they drop down here and witness this, and he auto shotguns those monsters. And so if I end the vid early at this point, it will actually be a lower average result than if I keep benchmarking past this point after killing the monsters. Or, you know, if I just spend too long in this general area, my FPS average is going to be too high to even get close to hardware unboxed. So I hope you can, that really hammers home the difference in performance that other users are getting, because I think I'm not the only one that's saying that the benchmarks seem a little off. Like something's running in the background, or a driver, or a monitor compatibility, Radeon settings default option is messing with something. But that's what it seems like to me. It really seems like something's messing with it. So one more time. Hit F7. This broken wall drops FPS for sure. Oh, FPS part. Spend like a little bit of time here. Maybe they did spend longer here in the actual, because they don't have the benchmark videos uploaded, because it would take forever to do it for all the graphics cards. But maybe if you spend long enough staring there, you could lower your average enough. But if the video is in this whole section, then the average is going to go up just from being up down here. Like you'd have to be averaging around 140 in this area to get 140 every benchmark run. Best out of 3, right? So I've got to end the benchmark right there, because it's already, as soon as those monsters are dead, there's no more FPS drop under 150. So one more run, and then we'll take a look at those benchmark figures that I've taken live. Like this is separate to the ones I've shared on the comment section of the Doom Eternal TechSpot page. So here's another run, F7. It's my hotkey. And instead of going to the armor, which seems to boost my FPS, I'll just stare at this screen section longer. Go through. See, this part does have a lower FPS that could drop the average, but you'd have to literally overspend your time here. And then it starts to go up after not long. Like, I don't know what happens, that something loads or something does something. Standing up there has got high FPS, above the XT performance. And these aren't my max FPS figures, you know, this is average. If you can look in the top right through the majority of the video where I'm fighting, or killing monsters where FPS, this should be intensive, it's not dropping. And yeah. Anyway, so that's that. That's my base frequency runs. I get higher results. I get like 160 FPS averages. I've even had as high as 170 that I did share when I try to space it into a 1 minute run, and I spend the full minute in this area, because that section with the FPS drop goes up in FPS after something happens in the background. Like, I don't know if it's monsters spawning in that you can't see off screen that drops it, but it seems like if I stay in that area long enough, the FPS goes back up anyway. So yeah, here's the benchmark file of all the runs. You're just gonna have to ignore the Radeon ones mixed in, because it's from having the Radeon window open for some of it. It actually benchmarks both at the same time. But you can see, I mean, this is the results. I can't, like, how's it? that was when I spent too long talking at the bottom. But you can see on average the actual runs, even the shorter ones that I tried to drop the FPS by staring at the ship in the background. My minimums line up with their results. My 1% lows line up with their RX 5700 1% lows, which I guess is the test bench and just an average, whatever, an average 1% low. But my actual averages are at XT level, which means their XT average is at 5700 level, and their 5700 average is much too low. Okay, so you can see these were actually slower runs because I was trying to stare at the thing for a little bit. You know, I was spending a little bit of time at that low FPS scene. That's how I was able to get it to drop. But if that's me trying, like with the base clock, base frequency, and literally trying to stare at the low FPS scenes, if that's my poorest result, and the rest of the time it's like 150 plus, then this average it doesn't make sense. And this average doesn't make, like, this should be a little higher, which puts it closer to here, but it seems like the XT is just really underperforming, because if I allow my GPU to boost, then I get what I feel an XT should be getting, somewhere around here. I get this kind of performance, the 1080 Ti performance level, and that's still, like, depending on how I play through the scene. If I literally stare at the low FPS after the broken wall, if I stand there and stare at the distance, that's what drops the average. But if I actually play, the average is like that. So the only hard thing is if I try to adjust the boost clock in recording, it might end up that you'll just be able to see my desktop and it won't record the game anymore. Like something goes unstable, or the ReLive just can't handle frequency changes during a video. But I can try, and then if it does it, it does it. Like I won't even be able to show you the results because it just will end up with one of the windows will just be open in the background, and that's all you're going to see. So wait, I'll close these. Now if I go to performance, so this is to try to give you a relative idea of what XT should be performing at. So even though I'm not running an XT, frequency boost. Is there a boost here? No, they're only talking about boost in performance. No, I'm looking at the wrong spot. RX 5700 XT game frequency. So that's not accurate. Come on, the RX 5700 doesn't run at 1600. We want the tech spot review, because this will. Now down here, game clock of the XT should be 1755. Okay. Base clock of the 5700 is actually lower. Sorry, I was using the wrong base clock, but technically your game clock should still be up at 16. So I was using the accurate game clock. I was just forcing it. So this is the performance I would expect. What I was actually using in my video, I was using 1620. Okay, so I was slightly mixed up with my base and game clock terminologies. The base clock of this XT is 1600, but the game clock is 1750, and the peak boost is 1900. So, and as well, the peak boost in optimal conditions with good temps is 1725. So you could just set a fan profile and hopefully in an air-conditioned room and get this kind of boost on a 5700. So if I be conservative and set it, well, not conservative, but if I try to replicate what an XT would get, even though I'm missing the compute cores, like you can see, the graphics cores are lower by a noticeable amount, and the peak compute power is lower. If I do try to replicate, which I have a profile here, I'm going to replicate a 5700 XT, or as close as I can get with my GPU. Wait, that didn't load properly. Got to load it twice. There we go. So 1750 And that's already applied, I think. It automatically applies when you load a profile. So you can see here, if I Alt-Tab a little bit, and then I go back to the software. Oh, the boost is still a little bit low. Maybe it's just not polling fast enough. Oh, sorry, my profile actually had the power limit too high. VRAM tuning, it's got it saved, yeah, but it's default. But this is more just to simulate what I think an XT should be getting. 1750 at minimum. At minimum, this is what I think an XT should be getting, and I'm missing compute cores with my non-XT card. So I'm going to close that. Close that. Got the benchmark file open. Back to Doom. Load the checkpoint, and we'll see. We'll actually be able to see the boost if I go to the menus in loading checkpoint. If the boost is working properly. Yeah, 1730. See it in the top right? Like you can only see it when I'm in a loading screen. This is when the OSD is buggy, like with Riva Tuner appearing. But the benchmark tool seems to be working fine. So from here, hit F7. Grab the armor. See the low FPS scene. It's actually running a little bit better. It's just somewhere here that drops FPS. Boom, boom. And then jumping down here, high FPS land. I would really like to see their 5700 and their XT in this scene. Like they can record the performance with the metrics up in the top right to see if they're getting the same FPS in this area or if it's really underperforming around the averages that they're showing. So yeah, I'm gonna end the benchmark there. So this is with the 1750 megahertz clock speed. Another one. F7. So staring at that boosts my FPS too. So there's no point staying in this area too long because the intensive scene is past the broken wall or around the broken wall. I think stuff is loading. Hey, like that's what it seems like. See, 118, or is it the bricks falling that does it? 120. If I stare there, at that bit. But then it goes back up. Look, now if I stare there, it's not dropping anymore after a moment. Isn't that weird? It's like something had to load and then it's loaded, or something in the background happens, like the creepy monster floating past, and then the FPS goes really high after that. Now see, I was trying to stay at range and the benchmark, and I'm trying to end the benchmark early to avoid standing in this non-intensive high FPS area too long. But they did drop down here in the video, so I've got to, you know, I have to try to replicate the whole scene. So I'll load it again. F7. And I'm gonna try to, if I see the FPS go low, I'm gonna try to spend a few moments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm purposely really trying to drop the FPS to 17 for the scale of the run. But see, now it's gone back up after that moment. Maybe that thing was loading. That thing that floats past, it's loading over here, and then that's what drops the FPS. That's my guess. After we see it appear, the FPS goes back up. So anyway, for sake of the proper run, here, jump down here, and he lets these guys like shoot for a bit. And I'll do some close combat so you can actually see that it's not intense. It's actually, the game runs better when you're fighting. It's really weird. Like, Look at that. It's 170 FPS at close combat. Anyway, ending the benchmark because it was already way too high at that point. And one more. I really want to like rush to that bit where the floating eye is loading up and see if the FPS goes back up as soon as it loads. See, the FPS around here is 130. If I stay here long, 132. So that could drop my FPS a little bit, staying here for ages. And wait for the eye to appear. Okay, so it's at 120. Floating eye. There it is. It loaded. 140. The FPS goes back up. So spending too long here actually gives more of a chance for the average FPS to go up. So if I want to drop my average FPS, I want to try to run through quicker and finish the benchmark sooner so that it doesn't have as much time to run at high FPS. But I'm already like above the XT performance, obviously. F8. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do this time, I'm going to make my way to the floating, to the green bit. So I don't want it to spend too long. If I see the FPS high, I'm going to rush. And then if I see the FPS low, I want to basically get to the end of the benchmark without giving the FPS a chance to run at higher numbers. Because the eye's already loaded. Oh no, see, it's going down here if I stare here for a bit. But now it's gone back up. It's weird. So it's not necessarily the eye, it's something. Something loading after you break the green wall. And then I want to end it as soon as possible. I just ended it right now, the benchmark tool, to avoid staying in this high FPS zone. And last one, because I'm really wondering, it's just something after that broken wall that causes an FPS drop. Okay, so I've already hit the benchmark tool. Here's the low FPS bit. Something's gonna load and the FPS will go from 120 to 140. Oh no, this time it's not doing it. No, now it's going back up. See, something did load. I just went through it too fast and killed stuff too fast. Something loaded and I was just staring here. It went from like 120 to 140. But the average is still going to go up as soon as I jump down. Like this, the average would be climbing right now in the benchmark tool. Just from fighting down here for a little bit. And then I end the tool right now. Okay. So now you see I've done like a whole bunch of runs for comparison's sake. And now we're going to go back into here. And the last run was at 438, so it should say 1638, sorry. So you can see there, that was the last run. Now, if we go, I don't know exactly what time I started these runs, I've done a bunch. But we should be seeing some discrepancies if there's something wrong with what I'm doing. Yeah. Actually, so maybe I started like 20 minutes. What was it? Let's just say it was from 2:30. 160, 156, 159, 156, 147, 149. These were the quick runs though. See these 36 seconds, 48 seconds? This was me trying to stay in that low FPS area for as long as possible, like after breaking the wall, and then quickly jumping down, killing the monsters, and ending the benchmark to not give it time to run at higher FPS because the FPS is really high at the bottom of the cliff. So these were like artificially lowered results by me. And then when I went through normal, like 55 seconds, 70 seconds, 58 seconds, any like longer amount of time just boosted the average up. And I was also staring at that low FPS scene multiple times for longer than necessary for a standard benchmark run. Okay, so that's weird. That's really weird, guys. And hopefully my change of the clock speed didn't ruin this video, or you'll just hear me talking, because I'm going to upload this anyway, even if it's stuffed up after I change the clock speed to XT level. Okay, so from about here, 7. I'm going to try to run through it a bit more normally now. I'm not going to stare at the particular. If I see the FPS, I'm not going to look at the FPS meter basically. I'm going to break the wall, kill the monsters, and do a normal run. Like, say someone's doing a speed run, they're not going to be staring at the scenery. They're going to be looking for monsters to shoot. You might look down here to see what's happening. Oh, I fell. Going down there boosts my FPS too much. And there we go, that was the scene. F8. So 441, 16, 41. There we go. 162 when I don't focus on low FPS backgrounds, basically. Like, you can call it an intensive scene, but if you're just staring at a background, it's not I don't feel it's relevant to the gameplay as a benchmark. Like, I don't think it's valuable, because I don't think anyone's gonna say, well, I was looking at this background after this scene, and then the FPS drops to 120, which it is still recorded anyway as a minimum, or as a 1% low. It still affects the results, but my results here are kind of matching. All of my 1% lows are matching what Hardware Unboxed posts. So those seem accurate, if not a little high at some scenes. But it's the averages that are off. Like, they're definitely off. If I can get a 162 average just by, like, not focusing on one specific area, then that's strange. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. That's it. If I play further, the FPS results are even higher. So I don't know if this is just a specific spot, but
the demonic consumption of Earth has been reduced by 36.8%. There are 2 hell priests remaining.
at last, the other thing I could think of is, what if Steve reloads the checkpoint? Because, you know, they didn't really explain the exact timing of everything. If they start, like, if I avoid this section that was in the video, and I go here, the FPS is low here. So if I start the benchmark here, my result is going to be average lower because I've spent less time in high FPS areas. And the stair here take too long. Okay, see the FPS is low, and now it's gone back up, so I gotta move. And then a stair down here for a little bit, and jump down. I'll just kill all the monsters. I think that's it. Oh no. Okay, and then I'll end the benchmark. So that last run was 444, 443. And I still got 151 FPS by starting the benchmark where the FPS is already low to begin with. It seems like jumping down is all it takes to boost the FPS up into the 150 range. Because yeah, starting the benchmark here is obviously going to be running higher FPS from this point of their videos. Looking there boosts the FPS. Collecting this is boosting the FPS. It's only breaking the wall and staring at this spot that will lower my average. Shooting that didn't make a huge deal. Maybe the minimum. Maybe looking over here where they looked at the hand. Nope. Not really. Over there, no. Jumping down just makes it crazy. Makes it crazy high. Fighting doesn't lower it. Just being down here is boosting the average, yeah. that's it. That's all the runs I'm gonna do. Reopen this for 45, 161 FPS average. So yeah, guys, and Hardware Unboxed and Steve and all that. Hope this helps with your diagnostics, and hopefully you can get on the right track to whatever is causing the issue. You even saw that I turned up the normal what I had in here, the global graphics, because it was on performance and it didn't seem to make a difference. Adjusting this either, like I don't think it matters. So I don't know what else it could be. Maybe it's just a driver issue, because I did see some people having driver issues with this specific driver. They were Fabio Piasco, like some of the other YouTubers were saying they had issues with this driver. It's supposed to boost Doom performance, but if your Doom performance is actually low compared to the early benchmarks that showed Doom performance being high, then maybe it is the driver or something else causing a problem. Yeah. Else I've got all this stuff turned off too. Maybe it's if you got all these things turned off, maybe something is interfering with the results. And my afterburner, I only use it for the OSD. I don't have fan control or overclocking settings that have been set through afterburner. It's all through tuning in the drivers. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one.